Welcome to Nightmare Lullabies. Here, we bring you chilling tales to keep you on edge while helping you unwind. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Got a creepy story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We might feature it in a future video. Now sit back, relax, and let the story begin. I've always been a night owl, so hitting the gym late at night is my usual routine. It's quiet, peaceful, and I can focus without the daytime crowd hogging all the equipment. The gym I go to is open 24 hours, and on most nights, there are maybe 2 or 3 people max. That's how I like it, just me, the weights, and my music. But about 2 weeks ago, I noticed someone new. He was tall, built like a bodybuilder, and always dressed in the same black hoodie with the hood pulled low over his face. He didn't talk to anyone, didn't smile, didn't even seem to sweat. He was just there. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone has their quirks, right? But as the nights went on, I started to notice something strange. Every machine I used, he used after me. Every time I switched exercises, so did he. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. Maybe we had similar routines. But then it started to get unsettling. One night, I moved from the squat rack to the bench press, purposely choosing a piece of equipment on the other side of the gym. Sure enough, after a few minutes, he was there too, picking up a bench right next to me. I switched again, this time to the free weights, and he followed within minutes. It wasn't just the equipment either. I started to notice him using the locker next to mine, even though the locker room was practically empty. He'd leave at the same time I did, always walking a few steps behind me in the parking lot before heading off to his car. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he just liked the same machines. Maybe he was new and didn't know the etiquette yet. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the pit forming in my stomach. One night, I decided to test him. I started with my usual treadmill warm-up, but instead of moving to the weights afterward, I went to the stretching area near the mirrors. Sure enough, within a few minutes, he was there too, sitting on the mat next to mine, pretending to stretch. At that point, I'd had enough. I grabbed my water bottle and made my way to the front desk to report him. But when I looked back toward the stretching area, he was gone. Just vanished. I asked the guy at the front desk about him, describing the hoodie and his build, but he just shrugged. "You're the only one here tonight," he said, scrolling through the check-ins on his computer. That was impossible. I'd seen him. I'd been watching him follow me around the entire gym for weeks. I didn't even bother explaining further. I just grabbed my bag and left. The next morning, I checked my gym's app to look at my workout history. It lets you see who else checked in during the same time slot as you. I scrolled through the list from the night before and froze. My name was the only one there. I haven't been back to the gym since. I'm no stranger to the gym, and over the years, I've grown used to the little interactions that come with the territory. A polite nod here, a casual "you done with this?" There, it's part of the routine. But what happened that night was anything but routine. It was a quiet Tuesday around 11 p.m. The gym was almost empty, just how I liked it. I was in the free weights section, working on my bench press. I'd just added more weight than usual, so I was pushing myself. That's when I heard the voice. "Need a spot." I looked up and saw a man standing a few feet away. He was tall, with short dark hair and a wiry frame. Something about him made me hesitate. Maybe it was the way he didn't quite meet my eyes, or the slight smirk that didn't match the situation. But I was mid-set, and I didn't want to risk the weight getting the better of me. "Yeah, sure," I said, trying to sound casual. He stepped behind the bench as I adjusted my grip. His hands hovered under the bar as I pushed the weight up. "You're stronger than you look," he said, his tone just a little too amused. I didn't respond, focusing on the lift instead. But then, as I struggled with the last rep, I heard him whisper something. At first, I thought I misheard. "What did you say?" I asked, lowering the bar onto the rack with a clang. "Nothing," he said, his smile widening. I sat up, wiping sweat off my forehead, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling over me. I decided to move on to the next exercise, hoping he'd leave me alone. But he didn't. As I moved to the dumbbells, he followed. He didn't say anything this time, just hovered nearby, occasionally glancing in my direction. I tried to ignore him, telling myself I was overreacting. When I switched to the leg press, he followed again. This time, he stood right in front of the machine, leaning against another piece of equipment, as if he were waiting for something. "You train here often?" he asked, breaking the silence. Yeah, I replied shortly, avoiding eye contact. Thought so. I've seen you before. Late nights, right? That set off alarm bells. I'd never seen him before, and I'd been coming to this gym at night for months. Maybe, I said, brushing him off. The rest of my workout was a blur. No matter where I went, he seemed to be there, lingering just close enough to make me uncomfortable. Finally, I decided to cut my session short. As I grabbed my bag and headed to the locker room, I heard him call out behind me. Hey, you didn't say goodbye. I didn't respond. In the locker room, I hurried to grab my things, my heart pounding in my chest. When I stepped out into the hallway, he was there, leaning against the wall near the exit. Leaving already? He asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. I didn't answer. I pushed past him and headed straight for my car. The parking lot was almost empty, and every shadow seemed to stretch too far. When I got in and locked the doors, I saw him standing by the gym's entrance, watching me. I didn't go back to that gym for a week, and when I finally did, I asked the front desk staff about him. They didn't know who I was talking about. No one matching his description had been there that night, or any night, for that matter. To this day, I can't explain what happened, but I've started carrying pepper spray in my gym bag, just in case. The gym at midnight has its own kind of atmosphere. It's quiet, almost too quiet, and the fluorescent lights seem harsher than during the day. For me, it's the perfect time to work out. No waiting for machines, no small talk, just me and the workout. That night started like any other. I'd gone through my usual routine, treadmill, weights, and then some stretching. Afterward, I headed to the locker room to grab my stuff and head home. It was empty, as usual, and the hum of the overhead lights was the only sound. As I opened my locker, I heard a faint noise, like a shuffle of feet or the soft rustle of fabric. I glanced over my shoulder, but the room looked empty. Probably just my imagination, I thought. Late-night workouts and exhaustion can play tricks on your mind. I went back to packing up, but there it was again, louder this time. A deliberate shuffle. I froze, my heart starting to pound. Hello, I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the empty space. No response. I scanned the room, walking slowly past the rows of lockers. The place was eerily silent, the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. I checked the showers, empty. Checked the stalls, nothing. I shook it off, laughing nervously at myself. You're just tired, I muttered. As I turned back to my locker, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The door of the locker next to mine, which had been closed, was now slightly ajar. I hadn't seen anyone else go in or out of the locker room. All right, whoever's messing with me, it's not funny, I said, my voice louder now. Still no response. Cautiously, I approached the locker. My hands felt clammy as I reached out and pulled the door open. It was empty, just like the rest of the room. I let out a shaky breath and grabbed my bag, ready to leave. But as I turned, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a reflection in the mirror. Someone was standing at the far end of the locker room. They were partially obscured by the row of lockers, just a dark outline of a figure. I spun around, but when I looked directly at where they should have been, there was no one there. My pulse was racing as I backed toward the exit, keeping my eyes on the mirrors. That's when I saw the reflection again. The figure was closer this time, standing in the middle of the aisle behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to. I grabbed the door handle and bolted out of the locker room, not stopping until I was in my car with the doors locked. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely put the key in the ignition. I didn't sleep that night, and I haven't been back to that gym since. Whatever or whoever that was, they can keep it. I've always preferred working out late at night. The gym is mostly empty, and I can go through my routine without interruption. But that night, something felt off, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. It started when I walked into the gym around 1 a.m. The only other person there was a man I hadn't seen before. He was tall, maybe in his mid-40s, wearing a hoodie pulled low over his face. He was sitting on one of the benches in the free weights section, but he wasn't lifting. He wasn't doing anything, really, just sitting there, staring at the ground. I nodded a polite acknowledgement and went to the treadmills, trying to ignore him. I started my warm-up, focusing on my breathing and the rhythm of my steps. But as the minutes passed, I noticed him out of the corner of my eye. He hadn't moved. Something about his stillness was unsettling. I told myself to shake it off. People come to the gym for all sorts of reasons, right? Maybe he was taking a break or waiting for someone. But when I moved to the weight machines, I felt his eyes on me. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I glanced over, pretending to stretch, and caught him staring directly at me. His face was still partially obscured by the hood, but his gaze felt piercing. I quickly looked away, pretending not to notice. I told myself I was overthinking it. Just some awkward guy, nothing more. But as I moved from machine to machine, he followed. Not directly. He didn't get up or walk behind me. Instead, every time I glanced his way, he was sitting on a bench or standing by a different machine, always in a position where he could watch me. It was unnerving. By the time I moved to the free weights, the tension was unbearable. I picked up a set of dumbbells, trying to focus on my reps, but my hands were shaking. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him rise from his bench. He was walking toward me. "Need help with that?" he asked, his voice low and flat. I shook my head quickly. "No, I'm good, thanks." He didn't move, just stood there a few feet away watching me. I set the weights down and grabbed my towel, pretending to check my phone. My heart was racing, and I was calculating the quickest route to the door. "You come here often?" he asked, his tone casual but his posture anything but. "Yeah, I lied. Pretty often." "You shouldn't come so late," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "Not safe for someone like you." My throat went dry. "I'll keep that in mind," I mumbled, grabbing my water bottle and heading for the locker room. I didn't even bother putting my stuff away. I just grabbed my bag and headed straight for the exit. As I walked out to my car, I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting him to follow. He wasn't there. But as I drove away, I saw something in my rearview mirror. A figure standing by the gym's glass doors, watching me leave. I canceled my membership the next day. Whatever that guy's intentions were, I wasn't sticking around to find out. I had always hated asking for a spotter at the gym. It felt awkward, like I was inconveniencing someone. But that night, as I was pushing my limits on the bench press, I realized I didn't have much of a choice. The gym was quiet. It was nearly 2 a.m., and there were only a couple of other people around. One of them, a guy who looked like he practically lived at the gym, was leaning against the wall near the weights. He was muscular, with a shaved head and tattoos running down both arms. He looked intimidating, but he seemed like my best option. "Hey, can I get a spot?" I asked, gesturing toward the bench press. "Sure," he said, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. He followed me over and stood behind the bench as I laid down. I started my set, and everything seemed fine. He encouraged me with the usual lines, "You've got this," and pushed through it. He even helped me rack the bar when I struggled on the last rep. "Thanks, man," I said, sitting up and grabbing my water bottle. "No problem," he replied, but he didn't leave. I figured he was waiting for his turn on the bench, so I moved to a nearby machine. But when I glanced over my shoulder, I saw him standing by the bench, watching me. Weird, I thought, but I shrugged it off. I moved to the squat rack, and after a few sets, I noticed him again. He wasn't using any equipment, just standing nearby, leaning against the wall. It was like he was watching my every move. "Everything all right?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he said, his tone flat. "Just keeping an eye out." "For what?" I wanted to ask, but instead I nodded and went back to my workout. Over the next half hour, he followed me from station to station. He didn't say anything, didn't offer to help, didn't use any of the equipment himself. He was just there. Finally, I decided to call it a night. I grabbed my towel and headed toward the locker room. As I walked, I felt a heavy presence behind me. He was following me. "Hey, thanks for the spot earlier," I said, turning to face him. "But I'm done for the night." He nodded slowly but didn't say anything. I hurried into the locker room, my pulse racing. I quickly grabbed my bag, skipping the shower, and made my way back out. As I stepped into the parking lot, I saw him standing by the entrance, staring out into the dark. His head turned slightly when he noticed me, but he didn't move. I got into my car and locked the doors, glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. The lot was empty except for him, still standing there, watching. I don't know what his deal was, if he was just socially awkward or if he had some other intention, but I wasn't going back to that gym to find out. I always keep my gym routine simple. I arrive, stick to my workout plan, and leave. No lingering, no small talk, just in and out. That night, though, something disrupted my rhythm in the most unsettling way. It was just after midnight, and the gym was mostly empty. There was only one other guy there, a lean, wiry man who spent most of his time in the corner near the punching bag. I'd seen him a few times before, but had never spoken to him. I finished my session, grabbed my towel, and headed to the locker room. The room was silent except for the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights. My locker was near the back, and as I walked down the row, I noticed something odd. There was a gym bag on the bench in front of my locker. It wasn't mine. I stopped, glancing around. The other lockers were shut, and the room was empty. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing slightly. No response. I looked at the bag again. It was black and unmarked, with a small rip near the zipper. Something about it made me uneasy, but I shook it off. People forget their stuff all the time, I reasoned. I opened my locker, grabbed my water bottle, and began packing up. But as I turned to leave, I noticed the bag again. It was slightly open, and I could see something metallic glinting inside. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped closer and hesitated, then slowly unzipped the bag. Inside were a pair of gloves, a small towel, and a knife. A large, serrated hunting knife. My stomach dropped. I quickly zipped the bag back up and stepped away, my heart pounding. What kind of person brings a knife like that to the gym? And why leave it here? I tried to calm myself. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. Maybe the guy in the corner owned it, and he had some innocent reason for carrying it. But then I remembered something. When I walked into the locker room, I had heard the door to the gym shut behind me. Someone else had been in here. I turned toward the door, half expecting to see someone standing there. The room was empty, but I could feel a presence, like I wasn't alone. Grabbing my bag, I rushed out of the locker room and into the gym floor. The wiry guy was gone. The punching bag swung lightly as if recently used, but the gym was otherwise empty. I didn't stick around to investigate. I left the gym and headed straight for my car, locking the doors as soon as I got in. That night, I couldn't shake the image of the knife from my mind. I told myself it was probably nothing, but deep down, I knew I'd never look at the gym the same way again. Late-night gym sessions always felt peaceful to me. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft clink of weights, and the rhythmic squeak of machines provided a comforting white noise. But one night, around 1:30 a.m., that tranquility turned into something far more unsettling. I was finishing up on the rowing machine when I noticed someone I hadn't seen before. A man dressed in a gray jumpsuit pushing a mop bucket. He looked like he worked there, maybe part of the cleaning crew. What caught my attention, though, was how quiet he was. Most cleaners I'd seen wore earbuds or whistled to themselves, but this guy didn't make a sound. He just pushed the mop across the floor in slow, deliberate strokes, his head down the entire time. I nodded at him as I moved to the free weights, but he didn't respond. Didn't even glance my way. As I worked through my set, I kept noticing him out of the corner of my eye. He moved around the gym in a strange pattern, not systematically cleaning row by row, but randomly darting from one area to another, almost like he was following some unseen path. At one point, he stopped by the water fountain, leaning over it for what felt like several minutes. He didn't drink. He just stood there, his head tilted slightly to the side. Something about it made me uneasy, but I told myself not to overthink it. Late shifts can make anyone act a little odd. But then I noticed something else. His mop wasn't wet. When he moved past me again, I glanced at the mop head. It was bone dry, not a drop of water dripping from it. Yet he kept pushing it back and forth across the same patch of floor, over and over. My unease grew, but I tried to focus on my workout. I figured he was just going through the motions, maybe trying to kill time until his shift ended. Then it got stranger. I moved to the treadmill to finish up with some cardio. After a few minutes, I glanced toward the front desk and saw him standing there, completely still, staring at the entrance doors. His posture was rigid, his hands gripping the mop handle tightly. My heart started racing. Was he waiting for someone? Watching for something? I kept my eyes on him, trying to act casual. After a minute, he turned and walked toward the locker rooms, his movements unnaturally stiff. I debated whether to finish my workout or leave, but curiosity got the better of me. I decided to check the locker rooms before heading out. As I approached the entrance, I felt my pulse quicken. The fluorescent lights inside were flickering slightly, casting long, uneven shadows. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing. No response. I peeked inside, half expecting to see him standing there. But the room was empty. The mop bucket and cleaning cart were gone, as if he'd never been there. I quickly grabbed my things and left the gym, my mind racing. The next morning, I mentioned the cleaner to one of the staff members. "We don't have any cleaners working overnight," they said, looking puzzled. I never saw him again, but I switched my workout times to early mornings after that. Whatever he was doing there that night, it wasn't cleaning. I prefer working out late at night. The gym is quieter, almost deserted, which means I can take my time and avoid the rush. That's why, at 2 a.m., I found myself alone in the gym's locker room, putting my things away before starting my session. The gym provides small lockers with combination locks, and I always double-check mine after locking it. I'd done it hundreds of times without a second thought. That night was no different. I stored my keys and wallet, locked the door, and tugged on it twice to be sure. Secure. The workout went smoothly, an hour of weights, followed by some light cardio. By the time I was done, I was exhausted and ready to go home. When I returned to the locker room, I noticed something odd. The door to my locker was slightly ajar. At first, I thought I must have forgotten to lock it properly, but I distinctly remembered tugging on it earlier. Cautiously, I opened it all the way. My heart sank. Everything was gone. My wallet, my keys, even the towel I'd left inside, all missing. I stood there for a moment, frozen. The locker room had been empty when I arrived, and I hadn't seen anyone enter or leave since. I decided to search the area, hoping someone had accidentally taken my stuff and left it behind. I checked every locker, even the ones that were locked, pressing my ear to them and listening for any sounds. Nothing. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. One of the lockers at the far end of the room was open. Not all the way, just slightly cracked, like someone had left it that way in a hurry. I walked over and hesitated before pulling it open. Inside was a pile of random items, a t-shirt, a pair of sneakers, and my wallet. Relief washed over me as I reached for it, but then I stopped. The wallet was open, its contents spread out neatly inside the locker. My driver's license was propped up against the back wall, staring back at me, as if someone had deliberately arranged it that way. Uneasy, I grabbed my wallet and checked it. My cash was still there along with my cards. Nothing was missing, but the way it had been left, it didn't feel like a random theft. I grabbed my things and left the locker room, my nerves on edge. As I headed toward the gym exit, I glanced around, half expecting to see someone watching me. The front desk was empty, and the night shift staff was nowhere to be seen. When I got to my car, I realized something else. My keys, they were already in my hand, but I didn't remember grabbing them from the locker. Had I been so shaken that I'd forgotten? Or had someone placed them there? To this day, I have no explanation for what happened that night. But I've never gone back to the gym alone after dark. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Late-night gym sessions are my favorite. The air in the gym feels different at that hour, calmer, less chaotic. It's just me and the machines, the occasional runner on the treadmill, and the quiet hum of the fans above. That night, around 1:30 a.m., I was on the bench press, lost in the rhythm of my workout, when I noticed a guy standing across the room near the squat racks. I'd never seen him before, but he looked like the type who'd be up at this hour. Tall, lean, with dark hair and a hoodie pulled over his head. He wasn't working out, he was just watching. I didn't think much of it. I'd seen people like him before, probably night owls like me, just here to get some space away from the crowds. But after a few minutes, he moved closer. He didn't go straight to any of the machines. Instead, he just stood by the water fountain, staring at me. It was unsettling. I could feel his gaze, even when I wasn't looking directly at him. Finally, after another round of sets, I decided to get some water. As I walked toward the fountain, I couldn't help but notice that the guy had started following me, slowly, keeping a little distance, but clearly heading in the same direction. I stopped and pretended to tie my shoe. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but his presence felt off. As I stood up, I turned to look at him. Our eyes met. "Hey, you mind if I ask you something?" he said, his voice low. I was taken aback. Sure, I replied, trying to act casual. He paused for a moment, then asked, "Do you come here often at night?" Something in his tone made me uncomfortable. It wasn't a casual question. It was like he was sizing me up, trying to figure something out. "Yeah, I'm usually here around this time," I answered, taking a quick sip of water. "Why?" The guy's eyes seemed to narrow just slightly, like he was studying me. "I've been noticing you for a while," he said, a faint smile curling on his lips. "You always work out so hard. You must be really focused." The comment caught me off guard. I didn't remember seeing him before, and I definitely hadn't been paying attention to anyone else in the gym. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. "I just like to keep to myself." The guy smiled again, but this time it didn't seem friendly. It was a little too forced. I get that, he said. It's nice to have some peace and quiet, right? To just focus and not be disturbed. I agreed, but something about the way he said it made me feel uncomfortable. The silence stretched between us, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Then, just as quickly as he'd started the conversation, he turned and walked away. Not toward the exit, but to a small corner of the gym where there was a mirror. He stood there, staring at his reflection, not moving. I stood there, unsure of what to do. I wanted to leave, but something held me in place. I glanced back at the guy a few times during my workout, but he didn't move. He didn't even seem to be lifting weights or stretching, just standing there, staring at himself. Eventually, I finished my workout and headed to the locker room. When I left, he was still there, standing motionless in front of the mirror. I don't know what it was about that guy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't there just to work out. It felt like something else was going on. The next time I went to the gym at night, I kept my distance, and I never saw him again. But I can't help but wonder if he was just waiting for someone, or if he was looking for something more than just a workout. I've always loved working out at night. The gym is quieter, and I can focus on my routine without distractions. Most people tend to avoid it after hours, which is exactly why I enjoy it. I like being left alone in peace with my headphones on, the soft hum of the machines, and the calming beat of the music in my ears. One night, around 2 a.m., I was in the gym, lifting weights near the far corner. The gym is large, but this section is tucked away, with a small mirror across from the equipment. I don't usually pay much attention to it, but tonight I kept catching glimpses of my reflection as I moved through my sets. I felt fine at first, but something was off. Every time I looked into the mirror, it felt like someone else was standing next to me. But when I turned around, no one was there. I dismissed it as exhaustion. Maybe I'd just been staring at the mirror too long. But as the night went on, the feeling grew. I couldn't shake the sense that there was someone standing next to me, always in the corner of my eye, just out of sight. I started looking around more frequently, but the gym was still empty. The lights flickered occasionally, but that's normal for an older building like this. Then I noticed something in the mirror. At first, I couldn't tell if I was imagining it, but there was a shadow, just a faint outline, standing next to me in the reflection. I stopped mid-rep and looked behind me. The area was empty. My heart started to race. I leaned in closer to the mirror, and that's when I saw it clearly. In the reflection, there was a figure standing right beside me, almost pressed against my shoulder. It wasn't a full body, just a silhouette, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. I could see the outline of a person, wearing dark clothes, their face hidden in the shadows. I spun around quickly, but again the area was completely empty. My breath quickened. I tried to shrug it off. It was probably just a trick of the light, or my tired eyes playing games with me. But then it happened again. Every time I looked into the mirror, the shadowy figure appeared next to me. This time I was able to see more details, a tall, thin figure with broad shoulders. They stood unnervingly still. The more I stared, the more it felt like they were watching me. I froze. I couldn't look away, but I didn't want to acknowledge it either. I was stuck in this staring contest with myself, or whatever was in the mirror. Without thinking, I grabbed my stuff, hurried out of the corner, and left the gym as quickly as I could. The next day, I came back. I told myself it was just exhaustion, or my mind playing tricks. But as I walked into the gym, I could feel the same unease creeping up on me. I didn't want to go near the mirror, but when I passed by, I glanced into it. And there it was. The same shadow. The same figure standing next to me. I've never gone back to that part of the gym again. Something about that mirror feels wrong, like it's reflecting something that shouldn't be there. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I'm not taking any chances. I still work out late, but I keep my distance from that corner now. Some things are better left unnoticed.